Good afternoon, and welcome to the third edition of the Grand Rapids Public Schools Wednesday weekly School Safety Informational Session. This is part 3 of a 4-part series on the components of a safe school. Thank you for joining us each week as we attempt to provide additional information on how to keep schools safe in our community. My name is Larry Johnson. I have the privilege of serving as the Chief of Staff and the Executive Director of Public Safety for the Grand Rapids Public Schools. Each week, we want to bring you information on how to keep our schools safe. We thank you for joining us last week, and as a result of that, many of you sent us in questions. We've selected a couple of those questions that we would like to address today.
What advances in security have helped make Grand Rapids Public Schools safer?
You know, there's been many advances in school safety and security, but what Grand Rapids Public Schools have done is put school safety on the top of the educational agenda. We are very intentional in how we connect with our students and our families. The passing of a $10 million bond for school safety technology, the redevelopment of our secured entryways, our entryways at our schools. Those are just a couple things, the highlights that we're doing to keep our schools safe in Grand Rapids.
What measures of security are the Grand Rapids Public Schools taking to prevent school shootings?
You know, as we said before, the schools is nothing more than a microcosm of the community, and whatever happened in the community can surely end up on the doorsteps of the schools. But there are some mitigation factors that's preventing things that we can do to keep our schools safe. And the number one thing is to build relationships with students, build relationships with our families, but also engage in our threat assessment processes, engagement in our mental health and our mental health first aid to understand when young people are feeling fearful or feeling anxious. See something, do something, say something. Utilizing OK to Say in the state of Michigan, as well as the Fast 50 programs, anonymous reporting programs for our kids. But the best protection we have is relationship building between our youth.
Recently, there have been shootings in several schools across the U.S. In what ways do you think incidents like these could have been prevented?
Surely, it's very difficult to prevent a school shooting. But the way that schools across this country and what they should have been doing is really engaging more in a robust threat assessment program, the training of school personnel, relationship building programs with the young people, taking all threats serious. Oftentimes there's leakage when there's a school shooting. Someone knew something prior to the shooting, but yet they didn't say anything. That's about relationships. And in every school shooting incident across the country, when you go back and analyze and reevaluate and assess what occurred, it came down to relationships leakage and individuals not having a safe place to report a potential act of violence among the schools. So had schools around the country put more into their threat assessment programs, more into mental health first aid of their students, I believe that some of the shootings could have been mitigated, prevented, and possibly reduced altogether. We thank you for sending in your questions, and we encourage you to continue to send in your questions as we go forward. We want to talk to you more about some additional components of a safe school. But before we can get there, we want to take a minute and pause and talk about some work from Patrick Lincona, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Because when there's dysfunction among our team members, that is when the components of a safe school will not work. So what are those dysfunctions that Patrick talks about? Well, first of all, he talks about inattention to results, when status and ego gets in the way of leadership. We talked about avoidance of accountability, having low standards and setting low standards for the district. We want to make sure that our teams, safety teams, our staff, our students always have very high standards. Ambiguity and lack of commitment. The fear of conflict. You know, conflict is healthy. Conflict is an opportunity for growth. This artificial harmony that we have inside of teams sometimes break the confidence of each other and breaks the confidence of the team. So finally, the absence of trust or invulnerability. We want to make sure that we have trust among the teammates. And when our teammates trust each other, then they begin to execute the components of a safe school that we believe will help reduce incidents in our school. So what are those components we want to talk about this week? Well, this week we just want to bring you just a couple additional components. Number one, we want to talk about crime prevention through environment design, or what we call SEPTEC. How we design our schools. You know, architects build very beautiful schools, and oftentimes they do not consider a school, the safety issues around the school. So what we have to be able to do is make sure that we look at the placement of our entryways, our bus arrival, separating our bus drop off from our parents drop off, making sure that the placement of our schools and the remodeling of our schools, that we consider the traffic flow into that school, the landscaping of the school, and not making sure that there's not bushes or trees that are growing that will eventually create a safety hazards. So all of these things are very important, and how we design the school, straight signs or lines of sight. Straight lines of sight is so important. And so when we do that, we create an absolute safer environment for our facilities people, for our staff, for our students to operate in. Our school safety audits, and ensuring that we're working with law enforcement, working with our emergency managers, working on our school safety and our operations team to look at the audits and look at what do we need to address. Is it a lighting issue inside the school? Is it some mechanical issues that needs to be addressed? But the environment that we need to look at. School safety audits look at a multitude of things. Those audits should be done yearly. All staff should sit down and go over those audits. And once you get those audits in your hands, it helps you make adjustments to your school safety programs. I want to go back to student pass procedures because we skipped that. Student accountability is so important, and knowing where your students are from the time they arrive to the time they leave. Imagine a high school with 30 classrooms, and if at 10 o'clock every morning, all the high school teachers gave a kid a pass or a scholar a pass to the restroom. That's 30 students wandering the hallway that's unaccounted for and who are not being supervised. Supervision of students all the time. Anytime a student is moving within a building, we must have some accountability. Our School Safety Leadership Academy. Grand Rapids Public Schools has created what has been called a national model for the School Safety Leadership Academy, and all of our administrators spend about 16 hours a year in this academy. But you know, we think this academy should be expanded not only to our administrators, but to all of our teaching staff, all of our support staff. School safety must be taken serious, and a minimum of 4 hours a year should be spent by every individual who's working inside the school. Our School Safety Leadership Academies gives us an opportunity to engage in another component, which is called the tabletop exercises. It's the what ifs. It's sitting around the table looking at past practices, past failures of other districts, past failure of your own district, and how do you improve on those to ensure that an incident will not happen again. So it's the what ifs. Your PLCs, your professional learning centers, when you go into your PLCs, 5 minutes to talk about the what ifs on school safety and security in a tabletop form, getting staff around the table and engaging your students in tabletop exercises will help make your district safe. And then the final component today is the technology utilization. And we have to drive technology. We can't let technology drive us. Anytime there's a school shooting incident around the country, we get hundreds of calls from vendors, and we appreciate those calls from vendors. However, every school district must decide what is best for them. What is good for Grand Rapids Public Schools may not be good for Detroit, may not be good for Los Angeles. Every district must decide what's best for them. So we take advantage of utilizing cameras. And we believe that cameras is only an investigative tool, and cameras stop nothing. Card access, walk-through metal detectors. Walk-through metal detectors, we believe, should be used random and unannounced. It should be part of your toolware. And there's a lot of tools on the technology that you can utilize, but tools alone will not stop an incident from occurring. It's about the hardware and not the hardware. Two-way radios, and making sure that you have a two-way radio system, not a system that you purchase off the shelf at a local technology store, but a dedicated channel that's dedicated to your district, your frequency, where you can get emergency information out. You know, those are just a couple of the components this week. What we want you to understand is that there's a variety of components. Many of these are low to no cost. It's about the human capital that you have in your district that will make the difference. Taking advantage of the human capital, utilizing your students, your staff, your parents, all entities, including law enforcement partnerships. These are all important factors to have when we talk about creating a safe environment. You know, we thank you every week for joining us each week. We think it's so important that you as staff members, you as parents, join us in keeping our schools safe. We can't do it alone in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. We need you, the parents, you, the staff members, but more importantly, we need you, the students. See something, say something, let's do something. Continue to send us your questions at securityquestions@grps.org. That's securityquestions@grps.org. And we look forward to you joining us next week on our weekly Grand Rapids Public Schools Wednesday weekly school informational sessions. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.